Judge Vivian Carter's fingers trembled as she watched the dashcam footage playing on national television. Her career, her reputation, everything she'd fought for over 40 years, now hanging by a thread because Officer Mitchell couldn't believe a black woman owned a Bentley. The gavel would soon fall. Before we dive into this shocking story of racial profiling that shook the nation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe justice should be blind to color, and subscribe to stay updated on stories that expose the uncomfortable truths in our society. Now let's rewind to that fateful day when a routine drive home turned into a national controversy. The summer evening air hung thick with humidity as Dr. Vivian Carter, 65 years old, and a federal judge with 3 decades of respected service on the bench, eased her new pearl-white Bentley Continental through the tree-lined streets of Oak Ridge. The affluent suburb, with its manicured lawns and colonial-style mansions, was predominantly white, a fact not lost on Dr. Carter as she navigated the familiar route home from the Children's Hospital Charity Gala, where she'd delivered the keynote address. Her sapphire blue gown complemented the elegant diamond earrings gifted by her late husband, Justice William Carter, before his passing 3 years prior. In her rearview mirror, Dr. Carter noticed a police cruiser that had been trailing her for several blocks. She maintained her precise 5 miles above the posted speed limit, a habit from years of judicial precision. Officer Brandon Mitchell, 37, sat behind the wheel of the patrol car, his eyes narrowing as he observed the luxury vehicle with its tinted windows. He'd been with the Oak Ridge Police Department for 11 years, ambitious and known among his peers for having an eye for suspicious activity, though internal reviews had noted statistical anomalies in his traffic stops involving minorities. Something about the Bentley seemed out of place to Mitchell, despite Oak Ridge being home to numerous luxury vehicles. Without any valid traffic violation or reasonable suspicion beyond his gut feeling, Mitchell activated his lights, directing Dr. Carter to pull over onto the quiet residential street. Dr. Carter's heart rate quickened slightly, an instinctive response she'd experienced since childhood when encountering law enforcement, but she calmly signaled and pulled to the curb, placing both hands visibly on the steering wheel as her father had taught her decades ago. Mitchell approached with practiced caution, his right hand positioned near his holstered weapon, a stance not typically used for routine traffic stops in this neighborhood. His flashlight beams swept across the interior before settling harshly on Dr. Carter's face. "Good evening, ma'am," Mitchell began, his tone carrying an edge of suspicion. "I need to know whose car you're driving tonight." The implication was immediate and clear. Dr. Carter maintained her composure, decades of courtroom discipline evident in her measured response. "Good evening, officer. I'm Dr. Vivian Carter. This is my vehicle." She reached slowly toward the glove compartment, narrating her movements. "I'm retrieving my registration and insurance. My driver's license is in my purse on the passenger seat." Mitchell watched with obvious skepticism as she presented her documentation: a valid driver's license confirming her identity, the vehicle registration in her name, and her federal judicial credentials complete with photograph. "These credentials look questionable," Mitchell stated flatly, examining her judicial ID with exaggerated scrutiny. "And this vehicle matches the description of one reported stolen from the Highland District." This was false. No such report existed. But Mitchell continued his improvised narrative. "I'll need to verify all this information. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Dr. Carter noted the sudden arrival of 2 additional patrol cars, their lights cutting through the evening darkness, despite Mitchell having made no radio request for backup. The situation was escalating without justification. "Officer, there must be some misunderstanding," Dr. Carter said, her judicial authority evident in her tone. "I've provided all required identification, and this vehicle is registered to me. I'd like to contact my son, who is an attorney." Mitchell's expression hardened at the mention of an attorney. "Put down your phone, ma'am. Any sudden movements could be interpreted as resisting." A young woman walking her dog across the street had stopped, her smartphone now recording the increasingly tense encounter. This bystander's concerned expression reflected the obvious disconnect between the prestigious vehicle, the elegant older black woman, and the aggressive police response. Mitchell, now joined by two younger officers who followed his lead, ordered Dr. Carter out of her Bentley. "For our safety, ma'am, until we can verify your story." The word story carried a clear implication of dishonesty. Despite dispatch confirming, over Mitchell's radio, that Dr. Vivian Carter was indeed the registered owner, Mitchell insisted on conducting a thorough investigation. Dr. Carter, still in her formal gown and heels from the charity event, was directed to sit on the concrete curb while officers searched her vehicle without consent. The indignity of the situation was not lost on the growing number of bystanders gathering at a respectful distance. "This is completely unnecessary," Dr. Carter stated firmly. "I am a federal judge, and you have verified my identity." Mitchell's response came with a flash of handcuffs. "You're being detained for officer safety while we complete our investigation, ma'am. Your attitude isn't helping the situation." The cold metal closed around Dr. Carter's wrists, tight enough to cause immediate discomfort against her thin skin. The young bystander's recording captured Dr. Carter's expression, a complex mixture of dignified restraint, humiliation, and a deep generational weariness, all too familiar to Black Americans faced with such treatment. Seated on the curb in her evening gown, a federal judge with 3 decades of service to justice, Dr. Carter became in that moment a powerful visual, embodiment of the disconnect between American ideals and American reality. Marcus Carter's phone vibrated against the conference table, where he sat negotiating a settlement for another client, a young black man wrongfully arrested while waiting for a friend outside an upscale restaurant. The civil rights attorney glanced at the unknown number, prepared to silence it when something compelled him to answer. "Mr. Carter, my name is Aisha Jackson. I'm standing on Maple Avenue in Oak Ridge, where the police have your mother handcuffed on the curb." She asked, "Someone to call you." The world seemed to tilt beneath Marcus's feet as he abruptly stood, knocking his chair backward. "I'm 15 minutes away. Keep recording everything," he instructed, before ending the call and rushing from the building. His Tesla accelerated. Through the evening traffic, mind racing through legal precedents and procedures, even as his heart pounded with familial fear. His mother, Dr. Vivian Carter, the woman who had taught him about dignity in the face of injustice, who had risen to the federal bench through decades of brilliance and determination, handcuffed like a common criminal. Marcus arrived to find the scene exactly as described. His 65-year-old mother seated on a public curb, evening gown spread around her, hands secured behind her back, while 3 officers stood over her and examined papers from her purse. The young woman who had called him stood nearby, phone still recording despite one officer's repeated requests to stop. Marcus approached with calculated precision, his Ivy League education and years of legal experience evident in his controlled fury. "I'm attorney Marcus Carter, legal counsel for Judge Vivian Carter. Remove those handcuffs immediately." Officer Mitchell turned to face the 6'2" attorney in his tailored suit, clearly recognizing the shift in power dynamics, but unwilling to concede. "This is a police investigation. Step back, sir," Marcus countered instantly. "This is an illegal detention following an unjustified stop with no probable cause. My mother's identity has been confirmed by your own dispatch. Those handcuffs come off now, or the lawsuit will include excessive force and senior abuse charges." The confrontation escalated as Mitchell positioned himself between Marcus and his mother, hand again moving toward his weapon. "Sir, interfering with a police investigation is grounds for arrest." The standoff might have deteriorated further if not for the arrival of Police Chief Thomas Wilson, a 30-year department veteran who recognized Dr. Carter immediately from community judiciary events. Judge Carter. Wilson's confusion was evident as he assessed the scene. He turned to Mitchell. "What the hell is going on here, officer?" The dynamic shifted instantly. Within minutes, the handcuffs were removed, though no apology was offered. Dr. Carter rose with dignity, refusing assistance despite her numbed hands and sore shoulders. Marcus documented his mother's physical condition with his phone. The reddened, bruised wrists from unnecessarily tight handcuffs, the dirt on her formal gown, while simultaneously noting her elevated blood pressure through the medical app, connected to her smartwatch. Local news vans began arriving, alerted by police scanner traffic about a federal judge being detained. The story was already growing legs. Chief Wilson attempted damage control, speaking quietly to Dr. Carter, while keeping a wary eye on the gathering media. "Judge Carter, I want to personally apologize for any misunderstanding." Dr. Carter's response was measured. Her courtroom, control evident despite her ordeal. "This was not a misunderstanding, Chief Wilson. This was a clear violation of my Fourth Amendment rights by an officer who refused to accept my identification and escalated a situation without cause. We will address this through proper channels." She declined all requests for comment from the assembled reporters, maintaining her judicial dignity even as she trembled slightly from the adrenaline crash. Marcus had no such reservations. "My mother, Federal Judge Vivian Carter, was racially profiled, illegally detained, and physically restrained without cause today. We will be filing formal complaints with the department, the city, and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. This officer's actions represent exactly the kind of bias that undermines public trust in law enforcement," Chief Wilson announced. That Officer Mitchell would be placed on administrative duty, pending a full review of the incident, standard language that typically preceded minimal consequences. The video captured by the bystander was already uploading to social media platforms, where it would accumulate millions of views before midnight. The hashtag #DanceJudgeInCuffs would trend nationally within hours. As Dr. Carter was finally allowed to return to her own vehicle, an unexpected ally approached, Judge William Harrington, a conservative white colleague from the federal bench who lived 3 streets over and had been alerted by a neighbor. "Vivian, this is unconscionable. You have my complete support in whatever actions you take." His presence and words carried significant weight, representing a bridge across the political and racial divides that typically characterized such incidents. The night concluded with Dr. Carter finally arriving home, refusing medical attention. Despite Marcus's concerns about her blood pressure readings, sleep would not come easily, however. Throughout the night, Dr. Carter experienced vivid nightmares connecting her curbside humiliation to historical images she'd seen, Black Americans being detained, restrained, and dehumanized across generations. Her personal trauma linked to collective memory, the weight of history bearing down on her judicial shoulders. By morning, she would face a decision: retreat into privacy to heal, or leverage her position to force a reckoning. The video of Judge Carter sitting handcuffed on the curb in her evening gown reached 50 million views overnight, the hashtag #JudgeInHandcuffs dominating social media across platforms. The stark visual juxtaposition, an elderly black woman, in formal attire, clearly no threat, restrained on public display by 3 armed officers, crystallized ongoing national debates about race, policing, and American justice in one undeniable image. Who gets the presumption of innocence in America? Is Lady Justice truly blind, or does she peek through her blindfold to check skin color first? Comment number 1. If you believe this officer would have treated a white woman the same way. Or number 2, if you think race played a definitive role in how this situation escalated. Hit that like button if you believe accountability is necessary, regardless of badge or bench. And subscribe to follow this story as it unfolds. Now, let's see how America responded when a black federal judge was treated like a common criminal for driving her own luxury car. National news networks framed the story according to their established political leanings, creating parallel narratives that reflected America's deepening divisions. Conservative outlets emphasized the difficult, split-second decisions officers must make, and questioned whether Dr. Carter had fully complied with officer commands. Liberal networks highlighted Dr. Carter's impeccable credentials and public service record, contrasting her treatment with similar situations involving white citizens. Officer Brandon Mitchell, against department protocol and without authorization, gave an exclusive interview to a right-leaning network. "I was just following standard protocol for suspicious vehicles," he claimed, seated in his living room, wearing a carefully selected family photo behind him. "This isn't about race, it's about patterns and statistics. That vehicle in that neighborhood at that time matched certain criteria." The Oak Ridge Police Union immediately issued a statement supporting Mitchell. Officer safety remains paramount in all interactions. While we regret any discomfort experienced by Judge Carter, Officer Mitchell's actions were reasonable under the circumstances presented to him at the scene. This circling of institutional wagons was predictable but troubling to those following the case. Dr. Carter had initially declined all interview requests, preferring to let legal processes work without media theatrics. After the police union statement, however, she agreed to one carefully controlled interview with Catherine Reynolds, a respected journalist known for her neutrality. "I've spent 30 years interpreting and upholding the law," Dr. Carter stated, her voice steady but her eyes reflecting lingering trauma. "To be treated as if I were stealing my own car, to have my identity and authority dismissed, to be handcuffed and seated on a public curb without cause. This isn't just about my dignity. It's about whether our system can acknowledge its blind spots and correct them." Meanwhile, Marcus Carter had been investigating Officer Mitchell's record, discovering a disturbing pattern. Mitchell had conducted similar stops targeting minorities in luxury vehicles throughout his 11-year career. 16 formal complaints had been filed against him for allegedly harassing minority drivers, yet none had resulted in disciplinary action. The statistics were damning. 84% of Mitchell's suspicious vehicle stops involved non-white drivers, despite Oak Ridge's population being 72% white. City officials, recognizing the potential liability and public relations disaster unfolding, began strategically distancing themselves from Mitchell. The mayor issued a carefully worded statement about taking all allegations of bias seriously, while establishing an independent review committee, staffed primarily with former law enforcement officials. Community activists, unsatisfied with these bureaucratic maneuvers, organized a substantial protest outside police headquarters. Over 2,000 people gathered with signs reading, "Judge this, racism wears a badge," and "No one is above the law," including those who enforce it. The protest remained peaceful but pointed, with several speakers recounting similar experiences of being questioned about owning nice vehicles or homes. The backlash wasn't limited to public demonstrations. The Carter family began receiving disturbing messages, death threats from white supremacist groups, hate mail, and even calls to Dr. Carter's unlisted home number. Marcus installed enhanced security systems at both his and his mother's homes, hiring private security for the immediate future. Judge William Harrington's support of Dr. Carter did not go unnoticed or unpunished. Conservative colleagues began excluding him from social functions, and he reported receiving messages questioning his loyalty to the Brotherhood of Law Enforcement. The thin blue line was being drawn, with expectations that everyone would choose her side. The internal police investigation into Mitchell's conduct proceeded at a suspiciously glacial pace. Key evidence, including portions of the dashcam footage showing Mitchell's initial approach and statements, was reported accidentally corrupted during the download process. Radio communications from the scene were similarly incomplete in the official record. Marcus, applying pressure through legal channels, discovered 3 previous complaints against Mitchell that had mysteriously vanished from internal affairs, records effectively buried to protect the officer and department from scrutiny. Dr. Carter, meanwhile, struggled with returning to the bench. Though outwardly composed, she experienced anxiety attacks before leaving home, flashbacks triggered by the sight of uniforms, and a newfound hypervigilance that exhausted her mentally and physically. Nonetheless, she forced herself to continue her judicial duties, refusing to let Officer Mitchell's actions derail her service. The first court hearing for a civil rights violation lawsuit filed by the Carters was scheduled, then promptly faced procedural delays as the department's attorneys employed every tactic to postpone proceedings. Justice, it seemed, would not be swift, a reality Dr. Carter had observed from the bench, but now experienced personally as a plaintiff, seeking accountability from a system designed to protect its own. As the Carter family pursued justice through official channels, the system's self-preservation instincts activated with disturbing efficiency. An investigative journalist discovered Officer Mitchell's father-in-law served as the mayor's golf partner and campaign finance chairman, connections that suddenly contextualized Mitchell's rapid promotions despite his problematic record. This revelation should have accelerated the investigation. Instead, it triggered a counter-offensive. The police department's public information officer anonymously leaked Dr. Carter's driving record to selected media outlets, highlighting a minor moving violation from 8 years prior when she had contested a questionable speed trap citation. The implication was clear. This judge wasn't perfect either. Conservative media personalities seized the opportunity, pivoting from the specifics of the traffic stop to broader questions about Dr. Carter's objectivity as a judge. Can someone who immediately assumes racial motives be trusted to render impartial judgments in cases involving police testimony? Asked one primetime host, skillfully reframing the victim as the aggressor. The character assassination campaign extended beyond Dr. Carter herself. Marcus discovered his law firm losing significant clients, corporations quietly withdrawing representation agreements citing concerns about politicization. His managing partners, initially supportive, began suggesting he take a leave of absence until the high-profile situation resolves. The financial pressure was calculated and effective, threatening both his professional standing and ability to fund the increasingly complex legal battle. The corruption extended to evidence handling as well. Additional footage from Officer Mitchell's partner's patrol car was found to have malfunctioned during critical portions of the incident. The department claimed technical issues affected multiple vehicles that evening, a statistical impossibility that nonetheless provided plausible deniability. Within the department, Detective Sandra Lopez from Internal Affairs found herself isolated as she attempted to conduct a genuine investigation. A 15-year veteran with an unblemished record, Lopez faced sudden scheduling changes, exclusion from briefings, and thinly veiled threats about her upcoming promotion review. "You're making powerful enemies over a simple misunderstanding," her supervisor warned during her performance evaluation. Sometimes loyalty to the department needs to come before abstract principles. Judge William Harrington, continuing his support for the Carters despite personal and professional costs, secretly provided Marcus with information about similar buried incidents involving Oak Ridge officers. "This isn't isolated," he explained, during a clandestine meeting in a neighboring county's public library. "I've seen at least 5 cases where minorities were detained without cause, only to have their complaints vanish into administrative black holes. The department has perfected the art of making problems disappear." While the institutional machinery worked to protect itself, Officer Mitchell's wife, Rebecca Mitchell, appeared on multiple morning shows portraying her husband as a dedicated family man and public servant unfairly vilified. "Brandon doesn't see color," she insisted, flanked by their 2 young children. "He's being crucified for doing his job by people with political agendas." The stress began taking a physical toll on Dr. Carter. Her normally controlled blood pressure spiked dangerously during a routine medical checkup, resulting in an adjusted medication regimen and her doctor's recommendation to take a leave of absence, advice she stubbornly rejected. "The moment I step back is the moment they win," she told Marcus during a rare moment of vulnerability. "This isn't just about me anymore." The mayor, sensing potential political damage from the continuing controversy, attempted to broker a private settlement. The offer delivered through intermediaries included a substantial financial payment in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and withdrawal of all complaints. "This could all go away," the city attorney suggested during a preliminary hearing. Recess. Judge Carter could return to her work without this cloud hanging over her, and the city could implement some additional training programs. Marcus didn't even bring the offer to his mother, recognizing it as an attempt to purchase silence rather than create accountability. The pressure intensified with a midnight phone call to Marcus's home. "Back off or lose everything," the electronically disguised voice warned before disconnecting. The police, when notified, expressed minimal concern and suggested it was likely just a crank call, despite the specific timing and knowledge of his unlisted number. Meanwhile, Police Chief Wilson was caught on a hot microphone at a police charity event, making dismissive comments about the case. Some people just can't accept being treated like everyone else. Pull the race card when they don't get special treatment. The recording, captured by an observant reporter, further inflamed tensions. The intimidation tactics escalated beyond threats. Dr. Carter exited the courthouse after a long day of hearings to find her Bentley's front tire slashed, a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Know your place. The courthouse security cameras had mysteriously deactivated during the precise time frame of the vandalism. The community itself became increasingly divided. Counter-protesters, many with connections to law enforcement families, began appearing at rallies supporting Dr. Carter, chanting "Blue Lives Matter" and carrying signs reading "Support our officers, not criminal coddlers." Local businesses found themselves forced to take sides, with some displaying blue line flags, while others featured "or Justice for Judge Carter" signs. The polarization reflected national divisions, with a routine traffic stop transformed into a symbolic battleground for America's unresolved racial tensions. Throughout it all, Dr. Carter maintained her judicial temperament, refusing to be baited into statements that could be weaponized against her. Her decades on the bench had taught her patience and strategic thinking. "They're waiting for me to lose control," she confided to Judge Harrington. "To fit their narrative of the angry black woman, I won't give them that satisfaction." But beneath her composed exterior, a fire was building, not just anger at her personal mistreatment, but a determination to expose the systemic rot that had allowed it to happen, and the machinery now working overtime to maintain the status quo. What began as an investigation into a single traffic stop gradually revealed something far more insidious, a pattern suggesting coordinated targeting rather than isolated bias. Marcus Carter, reviewing similar incidents across neighboring jurisdictions, identified an alarming statistical anomaly. Luxury vehicles driven by minorities were being stopped at rates wildly disproportionate to their presence on the roads, with the discrepancy most pronounced during evening hours in affluent neighborhoods. The geographic distribution formed a clear pattern centered around specific officer patrol zones rather than random distribution. The revelation came accidentally during Marcus's review of hundreds of police reports. Officer Mitchell's name appeared in multiple jurisdictions as either primary or supporting officer, despite Oak Ridge policies, restricting cross-jurisdictional activities without specific authorization. Marcus's persistence was rewarded when a dispatcher from the neighboring Westlake Department, troubled by what she'd witnessed over years of service, reached out through secure channels. "There's an unofficial competition among certain officers," she revealed, requesting anonymity due to fear of retaliation. "They call it profile bingo, points for stopping vehicles that don't match the neighborhood. Higher points for luxury cars with minority drivers. They track their scores through a private messaging group." This revelation transformed the narrative from individual bias to organized misconduct. Dr. Carter, reviewing her own court records with fresh perspective, recognized multiple defendants whose initial encounters with law enforcement had begun with Mitchell's suspicious vehicle stops. Cases where she had accepted officer testimony at face value now appeared in a troubling new light, prompting her to privately question how many injustices she might have unwittingly facilitated from the bench. "The system is designed for us to trust officer accounts," she confessed to Marcus. "How many times did I accept their version without question? How many lives were derailed because I believed in a system that was fundamentally corrupted?" Her self-recrimination, though unwarranted, reflected her deep commitment to justice. Within the police department, Detective Sandra Lopez pursued the investigation with integrity despite mounting pressure. Her reward was immediate reassignment to night shift evidence room inventory, a clear punishment for refusing to soften her findings. The message to other officers was unmistakable. Loyalty to the Brotherhood trumped loyalty to truth. The wall of silence surrounding Mitchell began showing cracks when James Peterson, who had attended the academy with Mitchell 12 years earlier, contacted Marcus after watching Dr. Carter's television interview. "Mitchell made it clear how he felt about minorities from our first week of training," Peterson revealed during a recorded statement. He used to say certain people didn't belong in certain neighborhoods or certain cars, that it was a cop's job to maintain the natural order. Several of us reported his comments to instructors, but nothing ever came of it. Peterson provided names of other academy classmates who could corroborate his account, though most remained reluctant to speak on record. The breakthrough came when an anonymous source provided Marcus with dashcam footage from another officer's vehicle, recorded 3 weeks before the incident with Dr. Carter. The video clearly showed Mitchell boasting about targeting out-of-place drivers and describing techniques for manufacturing probable cause where none existed. If they're driving something they couldn't afford legally, there's always a reason to stop them, Mitchell stated to a junior officer he was training. Registration light too dim, failure to signal early enough, following too closely. There's always something if you look hard enough. The recording demolished Mitchell's claim of unbiased policing. National civil rights organizations, recognizing the case's potential impact on policing practices nationwide, offered legal support to the Carter family. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the ACLU, and private civil rights attorneys formed a coalition to address not just Mitchell's actions, but the departmental culture that enabled them. Mitchell's personnel file, obtained through legal pressure despite departmental resistance, contained suspiciously glowing performance reviews describing him as exemplary and showing excellent judgment, despite the numerous civilian complaints. Every complaint had been marked unfounded after cursory investigations, often without interviewing the complainants themselves. Marcus's most damning discovery came through digital forensics. Mitchell's body camera had not malfunctioned, as claimed. It had been manually deactivated 9 minutes before stopping Dr. Carter's Bentley. Department policy required continuous activation during all public interactions, with deactivation constituting a serious policy violation. The intentional disabling suggested premeditation rather than split-second misjudgment. The stress of the case began manifesting physically for Dr. Carter. During a routine bench trial, she experienced chest pain and dizziness, collapsing while delivering instructions to the jury. Emergency medical personnel diagnosed a stress-induced cardiac event requiring overnight hospitalization. Though not life-threatening, the incident demonstrated the physical toll of fighting systemic injustice while maintaining her judicial responsibilities. Judge Harrington, whose support had provided crucial legitimacy to Dr. Carter's claims, faced professional retaliation. The district attorney's office began filing motions requesting his recusal from cases involving police testimony, claiming his public statements regarding the Carter matter demonstrate an anti-law enforcement bias that compromises his judicial objectivity. The coordinated attempt to isolate and discredit a respected jurist reflected the power structures aligning against accountability. While local battles continued, federal attention intensified. The FBI quietly opened a pattern and practice investigation into the Oak Ridge Police Department, with agents interviewing former officers and reviewing decades of complaint records. The involvement of federal authorities signaled recognition that the issues extended beyond individual conduct to potential civil rights violations. Financial irregularities added another disturbing dimension to the case. Mitchell's banking records, obtained through subpoena, showed unexplained cash deposits following certain traffic stops where vehicles had been impounded and searched. The amounts, while not large individually, formed a pattern suggesting possible theft or extortion during police encounters. The accumulating evidence and physical toll led Dr. Carter to consider stepping down from the bench. "Perhaps I can do more good as a private citizen focused on this fight," she told Marcus during her hospital stay. "I'm questioning whether I can fulfill my judicial oath while simultaneously challenging the very system I serve." Her dilemma represented the impossible position of those trying to reform systems from within, caught between institutional pressure to maintain the status quo and their own moral imperative to create change. The battle lines were clearly drawn, with powerful forces working to protect not just Mitchell, but the entire ecosystem that had nurtured and shielded him. What had begun as one judge's humiliation had evolved into a fundamental challenge to policing practices nationwide, with implications reaching far beyond a single traffic stop on a summer evening. The case of Judge Carter versus Officer Mitchell transcended local news to become national theatre, with morning shows featuring diametrically opposed narratives depending on their political alignment. Today, we're discussing whether police officers can effectively do their jobs when every interaction becomes a potential racial controversy, announced one conservative host, while across the dial another program opened with, "The systematic targeting of Black Americans by law enforcement continues, as evidenced by the shocking treatment of federal Judge Vivian Carter. Are we witnessing two Americas with two different justice systems? Has the pendulum swung too far toward questioning police authority or not far enough toward addressing systemic racism?" Comment number 1 if you believe Officer Mitchell deserves the benefit of the doubt, or number 2 if you think his pattern of targeting minorities reveals deliberate discrimination. Hit like if you're following this case closely, and subscribe for daily updates on how this confrontation is reshaping national conversations about race and policing. Now let's dive into how this local incident exploded into a cultural firestorm. Celebrity activists amplified the story, with influential figures across entertainment, sports, and business sectors publicly supporting Dr. Carter. Award-winning actors recorded readings of her judicial opinions, highlighting her decades of balanced jurisprudence. Professional athletes wore Justice for Judge Carter warm-up gear before nationally televised games. Corporate executives issued statements about examining hiring practices and police interactions in their communities. The combined celebrity attention exponentially increased public awareness, while further polarizing perspectives. Conservative commentators countered by framing the case as reverse discrimination against police officers. "We've created an environment where officers can't do their jobs without being accused of racism," argued former Police Commissioner Raymond Hughes on a primetime segment. "Officer Mitchell is being crucified for following standard procedure because the subject happens to be black. This is identity politics undermining public safety." Anonymous police sources, likely coordinated through the department's Public Relations Office, leaked misleading information about Dr. Carter's behavior during the stop. Selective quotes taken out of context suggested she had been confrontational and pulled rank, rather than cooperating with Mitchell's investigation. These characterizations, though contradicted by both bystander and dashcam footage, circulated widely through certain media ecosystems. Social media platforms struggled with content moderation as both supporters and detractors spread information ranging from documented facts to outright fabrications. Artificial intelligence analysis identified coordinated bot campaigns amplifying certain narratives, particularly those questioning Dr. Carter's impartiality as a judge. Platform executives, concerned about accusations of bias from either side, implemented inconsistent enforcement of misinformation policies. Amidst the media firestorm, Dr. Carter received the Thurgood Marshall Award for Judicial Excellence at a civil rights gala, using the platform to deliver a powerful speech about dignity and equal protection under law. When a judge in robes can be handcuffed on a curb because of implicit bias, no American can truly feel secure in their constitutional protections, she stated, her words resonating far beyond the ballroom. "This isn't about special treatment, it's about equal treatment, the most fundamental promise of our legal system." Mitchell counterbalanced with an appearance on American Patriots Tonight, a right-wing program where he portrayed himself as a victim of cancel culture and political correctness run amok. "20 years ago, I would have been commended for being vigilant," he claimed. "Now I'm being destroyed for doing exactly what I was trained to do, question situations that don't look right." His interviewer nodded sympathetically throughout, never challenging his assertions despite contradictory evidence. The legal battle intensified as the police union funded a bar complaint against Marcus Carter, claiming ethical violations in his public statements about the case. Attorney Carter has prejudiced the public against Officer Mitchell through inflammatory rhetoric and selective disclosure of evidence, the complaint alleged, attempting to undermine both the messenger and his message. While Marcus defended his license, forensic analysts completed their examination of the dashcam footage, confirming what the Carters had suspected: evidence of tampering. Timestamps showed discontinuities, and audio levels changed abruptly during critical exchanges. The specialist's report concluded, "This recording has been altered post-incident in a manner consistent with deliberate evidence manipulation rather than technical malfunction." Judge William Harrington, recognizing the importance of judicial solidarity, publicly released records from his own courtroom, documenting similar incidents where minority defendants had been stopped under questionable circumstances. "As judges, we have a unique window into patterns that might escape notice individually," he wrote in a Washington Post opinion piece. What happened to Judge Carter represents not an anomaly, but a systemic issue requiring systemic solutions. The Department of Justice, responding to mounting evidence and public pressure, announced a formal investigation into pattern or practice civil rights violations within the Oak Ridge Police Department. This federal intervention raised the stakes significantly, as findings could result in consent decrees and mandatory reforms beyond the scope of individual lawsuits. The announcement sent shockwaves through the department's leadership. Mitchell's personal life unraveled alongside his professional standing when his wife, Rebecca, filed for divorce after discovering text messages between Mitchell and fellow officers explicitly discussing racial profiling strategies. "I can no longer reconcile the man I married with the person revealed in these communications," her statement read. "As a mother raising children in a diverse society, I cannot support or excuse views that fundamentally contradict my values and our community standards." Her departure removed a key sympathetic figure from Mitchell's public defense. Dr. Carter's colleagues on the federal bench, initially hesitant to comment on an ongoing investigation, finally issued a collective statement supporting her integrity. Remarkably, the statement transcended typical political divisions, with appointees from both Republican and Democratic administrations affirming their confidence in her character and judgment. Judge Carter's 3 decades of service exemplify the best traditions of the federal judiciary, they wrote. Her treatment during this incident reflects troubling biases that undermine public confidence in equal justice. Public opinion, initially divided along predictable partisan lines, began shifting as more evidence emerged about departmental-wide issues in Oak Ridge. Polling showed increasing percentages of white Americans acknowledging the role racial bias had played in the incident, particularly among suburban residents who had previously expressed strong support for law enforcement. The media circus continued unabated, but beneath the sensationalism and political posturing, a substantive national conversation had begun about the daily indignities faced by minorities, regardless of their professional achievements or social standing. Dr. Carter's experience resonated because it demonstrated an uncomfortable truth. Education, position, and wealth provided no immunity from the effects of systemic bias. The fundamental question extended beyond one traffic stop to the larger American experiment. Could a nation founded on equality before the law actually deliver that promise to all its citizens? The carefully constructed defense of Officer Mitchell collapsed spectacularly when his former partner, Sergeant James Wilson, approached the FBI with recordings that shocked even seasoned investigators. "I kept these as insurance," Wilson explained, submitting smartphone recordings from patrol car conversations spanning 2 years. The audio captured Mitchell making explicitly racist comments and, most damaging, admitting to targeting practices. "These people don't belong in these neighborhoods or these cars. Someone's got to maintain the natural order." Most incriminating was Mitchell's detailed explanation of his scoring system for targeting minority drivers in luxury vehicles and his techniques for ensuring complaints would never stick. Always claim officer safety. Always say they were hostile or seemed impaired. Internal affairs can't prove otherwise, and the union has our backs. The recordings devastated Mitchell's public claims of unbiased policing and revealed a calculated strategy rather than implicit bias. The revelations coincided with Dr. Carter's most vulnerable public moment. During a routine court proceeding, a uniformed bailiff resembling Mitchell entered her courtroom, triggering a severe anxiety attack that forced a recess. Court staff witnessed their normally composed judge struggling to breathe, hands trembling as she clutched the bench for support. Though she insisted on returning to complete the day's docket, the incident demonstrated the invisible wounds inflicted by her experience. Medical experts later testified about post-traumatic stress responses in victims of racial profiling, validating experiences long dismissed as oversensitivity. The cascade of evidence and growing public pressure prompted Police Chief Thomas Wilson to announce his retirement, citing vague health concerns in a tersely worded statement. Department insiders revealed Wilson had been given an ultimatum by city leadership: resign voluntarily or face termination once the federal investigation published its findings. His departure represented the first significant administrative consequence of the Carter case. Internal Affairs, freed somewhat from leadership constraints after Wilson's departure, concluded its investigation with a surprisingly forceful recommendation. Officer Mitchell's actions during the Carter incident represent gross misconduct, warranting immediate termination. Furthermore, evidence suggests a pattern of similar misconduct requiring review of all citations and arrests initiated by this officer during his tenure. The uncharacteristically direct language suggested the department attempting to salvage institutional credibility by sacrificing Mitchell. The mayor, Thomas Franklin, held an elaborate press conference announcing a comprehensive review of departmental practices and the formation of a community oversight committee with significant advisory capacity. The performance of accountability contrasted sharply with Franklin's private actions. Records later revealed he simultaneously directed the city attorney to develop strategies for limiting municipal liability and undermining potential consent decrees. Marcus Carter's investigation continued, revealing disturbing departmental practices. Through Freedom of Information requests and confidential sources, he discovered documented quotas for vehicle searches in predominantly minority neighborhoods, with officer evaluations explicitly rewarding proactive enforcement measured by stop quantities rather than legitimate outcomes. Officers who failed to meet these unofficial quotas received unfavorable assignments and reduced overtime opportunities. Mitchell, recognizing his increasing isolation as former allies distanced themselves, was recorded threatening Detective Lopez during a chance encounter in the department parking garage. "You think you're safe because you're following the rules? There are no rules when it comes to rats. Watch your back." The threat, captured on Lopez's personal recording device, resulted in a restraining order, but demonstrated Mitchell's deteriorating self-control. The most alarming escalation came when Dr. Carter received a death threat deemed credible by FBI analysts. The meticulously typed letter contained personal details not publicly available, including her grandchildren's school locations and her morning jogging route. "Justice will be served one way or another," the letter concluded, prompting immediate security enhancements and temporary relocation of her family members. Judge Harrington faced his own professional crisis as political opponents initiated impeachment proceedings, claiming his public statements about the Carter case demonstrated judicial activism incompatible with impartial application of the law. The transparent attempt to silence institutional criticism failed procedurally, but successfully intimidated other judges considering public support for reforms. The breaking point for the department came hours before Mitchell's long-delayed disciplinary hearing, when he simply disappeared. His service weapon was properly secured at the station, but his personal firearms were removed from his home, along with clothing and emergency supplies. The manhunt lasted less than 48 hours before the department's embarrassment intensified. Mitchell had been hiding at a remote cabin owned by Assistant Chief Robert Anderson, suggesting high-level department complicity in potential evidence tampering. While Mitchell remained temporarily missing, Dr. Carter delivered powerful testimony before the State Judiciary Committee investigating policing practices. "We cannot separate individual actions from the systems that enable them," she stated, her judicial authority evident despite her personal trauma. "What happened to me was not an aberration, but a predictable outcome of policies that incentivize suspicion based on appearance rather than behavior. The question isn't whether bias exists in our systems, The evidence clearly demonstrates it does. The question is whether we possess the moral courage to remake these systems to deliver their promised equality. The breaking point for public opinion came with the release of departmental emails obtained through litigation. The messages revealed explicit discussions among supervisors about targeting expensive cars with black drivers in affluent neighborhoods, with one captain instructing officers to make them prove they belong. The unambiguous language contradicted years of official denials about systematic profiling. National protests erupted after a similar incident in another state ended with fatal consequences. A black architectural engineer shot during a traffic stop when an officer mistook his design tool for a weapon. The proximity to Dr. Carter's experience created a powerful narrative connection, with protesters carrying signs reading, "First they handcuff, then they shoot," and "From judge to engineer, no one is safe." The compounding pressure, public, legal and institutional, created the environment for Dr. Carter's most consequential decision. Rather than stepping back from her judicial role as she had previously considered, she determined to use her position's full authority. In a historic move, she convened a special grand jury investigation into systematic civil rights violations within law enforcement agencies across the district. "The tools of justice must sometimes be turned toward justice's own institutions," she wrote in the convening order. "When those entrusted with upholding the law become systematic violators of constitutional protections, the judiciary has not just the right, but the obligation to intervene." The special grand jury, with its substantial investigative powers and subpoena authority, represented the system finally turning its machinery toward self-correction rather than self-protection. Mitchell, the individual officer whose actions had initiated this reckoning, had become almost secondary to the larger institutional failings his case had exposed, a symptom rather than the disease itself. The breaking point had been reached, not just for one department or one case, but for the comforting fiction that isolated bad apples rather than orchard-wide conditions produced the persistent bitter fruit of unequal justice. Officer Brandon Mitchell's attempt to evade accountability ended inglorious at a remote hunting cabin registered to Assistant Chief Robert Anderson, a revelation that implicated department leadership in potential obstruction of justice. FBI agents rather than local officers conducted the arrest, signaling federal authorities diminishing trust in the department's integrity. Mitchell's first court appearance created the unprecedented scenario of Dr. Carter facing her tormentor from the bench rather than the defendant's table, having refused to recuse herself despite defense motions. Citing the case's assignment to her docket through standard random procedures, she addressed the ethical complexities directly. This court recognizes the unusual circumstances of presiding over matters connected to an officer involved in my personal experience. However, judges routinely adjudicate cases involving institutions they interact with personally. My oath requires impartiality, regardless of prior knowledge. Any rulings will be based solely on evidence and law, subject to appellate review. Her judicial authority, temporarily undermined during the traffic stop, was now fully restored and amplified. The power dynamic had reversed completely. The investigation continued, revealing disturbing connections. Digital forensics specialists recovered encrypted messages linking Mitchell to an online community calling itself the Thin Blue Shield, a shadowy network of officers sharing strategies for targeting minorities while evading accountability. The group maintained detailed information about complaint processes in various jurisdictions and techniques for discrediting potential complainants. Find any history of mental health treatment, financial problems, or minor legal issues, anything, to undermine credibility. Read one training document. Remember, it's their word against yours and the system is designed to believe you. Marcus Carter, working alongside federal investigators, uncovered a pattern of evidence tampering extending far beyond his mother's case. Records showed dozens of instances where dashcam footage, incident reports and witness statements had been altered or lost in cases involving excessive force or racial profiling allegations. The systematic nature of the obfuscation suggested institutional practices rather than individual misconduct. "They've created parallel record systems," Marcus explained to federal prosecutors, "one for public and court consumption, another reflecting actual events. The question becomes how many innocent people have been convicted based on manipulated evidence, and how many officers escaped accountability through institutional protection." The police union, recognizing the indefensible nature of Mitchell's actions as evidence mounted, finally distanced itself from the former officer. The breaking point came with the discovery of financial improprieties. Mitchell had allegedly skimmed cash and valuables during vehicle searches, sharing percentages with supervising officers who protected him. The Oak Ridge Police Officers Association supports officers acting within their oath and the law. Their statement read, "We cannot and will not defend criminal conduct that betrays public trust and tarnishes the badge most officers wear honorably." The abandonment by former allies left Mitchell increasingly isolated. An unexpected perspective emerged when Rebecca Mitchell, Brandon's estranged wife, contacted Dr. Carter directly, requesting a private meeting. Against her son's advice, but following her judicial instinct, Dr. Carter agreed. During their conversation, in Dr. Carter's chambers, Rebecca revealed a history of domestic abuse that contextualized Brandon's behavior. "His violence wasn't limited to his work," she explained, showing photographs of bruises hidden during her television appearances defending him. "He categorizes people as either dominant or submissive. The racism, the profiling, it's all part of his need to control and dominate those he considers beneath him." The revelation added complexity to the narrative without excusing Mitchell's actions, highlighting how personal pathology often intertwines with institutional failures. Further, investigation into Mitchell's background uncovered another systemic failure. His academy records showed he had initially failed psychological evaluation screenings, with examiners noting concerning tendencies toward authoritarianism and racial bias. These red flags were overridden through intervention by a senior department official, Mitchell's uncle by marriage, who had since risen to deputy commissioner in the state law enforcement agency. The pattern of nepotism and overlooked warning signs extended throughout his career. The danger to those pursuing accountability remained very real. Marcus narrowly escaped serious injury when his vehicle's brake lines showed evidence of tampering, discovered during routine maintenance rather than catastrophic failure only by chance. The attempt elevated the case from professional misconduct to potential attempted murder, intensifying federal involvement and security protocols. The accumulated evidence resulted in a federal grand jury returning indictments against Mitchell and 4 other officers for civil rights violations, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and witness intimidation. Additionally, 2 administrative officers faced charges related to obstruction of justice. The indictments represented the most significant police accountability action in the state's history. A department-wide audit, conducted by independent investigators under federal supervision, revealed systematic falsification of reports involving minority encounters. Statistical analysis showed Black and Hispanic drivers were 6 times more likely to have evidence planted during searches, be charged with resisting arrest during routine interactions, or have force used against them than white drivers in identical circumstances. The mathematical certainty of the disparities demolished claims of coincidence or individual officer discretion. Dr. Carter's health gradually improved as the justice machinery moved forward. The anxiety attacks decreased in frequency, her blood pressure stabilized, and she reported sleeping through the night for the first time since the incident. "There's healing in accountability," she told her medical team. "Not vengeance, but the simple acknowledgement that wrong was done and consequences must follow." Judge Harrington provided crucial testimony linking departmental practices to judicial outcomes, demonstrating how manufactured probable cause in initial encounters created cascading consequences through the legal system. When the first link in the chain of justice is corrupted, every subsequent proceeding is tainted, he testified before the Congressional Subcommittee on Law Enforcement Practices. Judges make determinations based on officer testimony presumed to be truthful. When that presumption is systematically exploited, Innocent citizens are criminalized and constitutional protections rendered meaningless. The mayor's involvement in covering up previous incidents became impossible to ignore. When emails emerged showing he had personally intervened to quash investigations into officers with connection to his political donors, the scandal expanded beyond Mitchell to implicate governance structures designed to protect power rather than serve justice. Facing mounting evidence and potential decades in federal prison, Mitchell made the decision many corrupt officers eventually face: trading information for leniency. His plea agreement required full disclosure of departmental practices, testimony against superior officers, and acknowledgement of his actions against Dr. Carter and other victims. The most powerful moment in the legal proceedings came when Dr. Carter requested a supervised meeting with Mitchell, not as judge and defendant, but as victim and perpetrator. The restorative justice approach was unprecedented in a case of this profile. In the conference room of the federal building, separated by a table but not by bulletproof glass or barriers, Dr. Carter asked the question at the heart of the case. I need to understand why, not just the policies or pressures, but why you personally chose to treat another human being this way. Mitchell's response, halting and defensive at first, gradually revealed layers of indoctrination, personal insecurity, and systematic reinforcement of problematic behaviors. It wasn't really about you specifically, he admitted. You represented something, success and status I believed wasn't earned fairly. The department rewarded us for acting on those beliefs, promoted us for finding ways to put certain people in their place. I never questioned whether I was right because everything in the system told me I was. The exchange provided no easy resolution or dramatic reconciliation, but something perhaps more valuable, a momentary lifting of the veil between America's parallel realities and an acknowledgement of the human damage inflicted when power operates without accountability. As the legal processes moved toward their conclusions, the case had transformed from a single incident of profiling to a comprehensive examination of how justice functions, or fails to function, for different Americans based on appearance, status, and power. The confrontation was no longer simply between Dr. Carter and Officer Mitchell, but between America's foundational promises and its daily practices. Mitchell's comprehensive testimony proved devastating to the department's power structure, leading to indictments against 3 senior officers and 2 city officials for crimes ranging from civil rights violations to witness tampering and obstruction of justice. The plea agreement that spared him maximum sentencing created a domino effect of cooperation, with each implicated official seeking leniency through further disclosures. The corruption had not been isolated but systemic, with tentacles reaching into multiple institutions designed to protect citizens rather than target them. As the cases progressed through federal court, Governor Eleanor Richardson recognized the opportunity for broader reform, appointing Dr. Carter to chair the newly established State Commission on Equitable Policing. Judge Carter's unique perspective, as both a respected jurist and a victim of profiling, provides the precise combination of legal expertise and lived experience this commission requires, the governor stated during the televised announcement. Her commitment to justice rather than retribution makes her the ideal leader for reimagining public safety that serves all citizens equally. Dr. Carter accepted the appointment with characteristic thoughtfulness. This commission will not be focused on punishment, but on prevention. We cannot undo past injustices, but we can create systems that make such injustices increasingly rare and swiftly corrected when they occur. Her approach focused on structural changes rather than individual blame, recognizing that sustainable reform required addressing root causes rather than symptoms. Marcus Carter, inspired by his mother's vision and transformed by his experience navigating a system designed to frustrate accountability, established the Carter Justice Center, a legal clinic specializing in civil rights violations with particular emphasis on law enforcement misconduct. The center provided pro bono representation to victims without financial resources or public platforms, ensuring that justice wasn't limited to those with Judge Carter's credentials and connections. What happened to my mother revealed how the system responds when someone with power and resources is victimized, Marcus explained during the center's opening. Most victims lack her advantages, yet deserve identical protection. Our mission is making equal justice under law an operational reality rather than an aspirational slogan. The Oak Ridge Police Department underwent mandatory retraining focused on implicit bias recognition, de-escalation techniques, and community-centered policing philosophies. More significantly, the department implemented structural reforms including civilian oversight with genuine disciplinary authority, body camera protocols with automatic activation and tamper-proof storage, and early intervention systems to identify officers displaying problematic patterns before they escalated to misconduct. Judge William Harrington announced his retirement from the federal bench after 27 years of service, then surprised colleagues by accepting a position teaching ethics and constitutional law at the State Police Academy. Accountability begins with education, he explained. Officers need to understand the constitutional framework they're sworn to uphold before they ever receive a badge or weapon. His curriculum became mandatory for all cadets statewide, with particular emphasis on Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure. The Carter case itself became required study in law enforcement training nationwide, with the dashcam and bystander footage used to illustrate how quickly routine interactions can escalate when bias influences perception. Academies paired the video with training on recognition of implicit assumptions and their potentially devastating consequences for both citizens and officer careers. Officer Mitchell, after completing a reduced 3-year sentence in federal custody, made the unexpected decision to participate in restorative justice programs, sharing his perspective with police cadets as a cautionary example. I believed I was one of the good ones, he told each class. That's what makes implicit bias so dangerous. It operates below conscious awareness while creating justifications that feel legitimate. I ruined my career, damaged countless lives, and betrayed my oath because I couldn't recognize my own prejudices. His testimony lacked the polished performance of his earlier media appearances, instead carrying the weight of genuine reflection and regret. The Community Oversight Board, established through federal consent decree, represented a revolutionary approach to police accountability in the region. Unlike previous civilian review mechanisms with purely advisory capacity, this board received authority to review officer conduct, recommend disciplinary measures, and even override departmental decisions in serious misconduct cases. Most significantly, the board's civilian investigators had independent access to evidence, eliminating the conflict of interest inherent in police investigating themselves. Police unions initially fought these changes vigorously, but after several officers faced criminal charges for misconduct that internal processes would have previously buried, the union leadership recognized the protection independent review offered ethical officers. Genuine accountability separates professional law enforcement from those who dishonor the badge, the union president acknowledged in a historic settlement agreement accepting oversight provisions. Officers committed to constitutional policing have nothing to fear from transparency. Dr. Carter's memoir, Beneath the Robe, Justice, Race, and Power in America, became a national bestseller and book club favorite, creating thoughtful conversations about the distance between American ideals and American practices. Rather than focusing exclusively on her personal ordeal, she contextualized her experience within the broader historical struggle for equal justice, acknowledging progress while unflinchingly documenting remaining challenges. Perhaps the most surprising development came through the psychological evaluation of Mitchell during his incarceration. The assessment revealed his actions were partly motivated by childhood trauma involving his father's bankruptcy following a business partnership. With a successful black entrepreneur, Mitchell's father had blamed his partner rather than economic conditions for the failure, instilling a deep-seated resentment that manifested as adult bias. This insight added complexity without excusing his actions, highlighting how personal history and systematic racism intertwine to create discriminatory behaviors that their perpetrators rationalize as justified. The Bentley Continental that had triggered Mitchell's profiling response found a meaningful second life when Dr. Carter donated it to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. The vehicle became the centerpiece of an exhibit titled "Driving While Black Transportation and Civil Rights in Modern America," contextualizing contemporary profiling within the historical restrictions on black mobility from sundown towns to Green Book navigation. Dr. Carter and Detective Sandra Lopez, whose integrity during the internal investigation had cost her promotions but earned widespread respect, established a pioneering dialogue program bringing judiciary members and law enforcement officers together in structured conversations about their intersecting roles in the justice system. "We operate in the same ecosystem, but rarely communicate outside adversarial courtroom contexts," Dr. Carter explained. "Building mutual understanding creates partnerships for justice rather than opposing camps." The program expanded nationally, credited with improving both police practices and judicial awareness of frontline challenges. 4 years after the traffic stop that triggered national soul-searching about race and justice, Dr. Carter drove her new electric sedan through the same Oak Ridge neighborhood where she had been handcuffed on the curb. A patrol car passed her, the officer nodding respectfully in recognition. The simple professional courtesy, unremarkable for most citizens but historically uncertain for minorities regardless of status, represented not the end of America's complex relationship with race, but perhaps progress toward its foundational promise that all citizens would receive equal protection under law. The epilogue revealed the most significant outcome: lasting systemic changes triggered by one judge's refusal to accept injustice, even when accepting would have been easier than challenging power structures designed to resist accountability. The Carter case had transformed from a personal humiliation to a catalyst for reimagining justice itself. What does justice really look like in a diverse society? Has America truly faced its history of unequal treatment under law, or do we still have work to do? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can build systems that deliver on the promise of equal justice. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the challenging intersections of race, power, and justice in America. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that true justice isn't about vengeance, but about creating systems that protect everyone's dignity. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most consequential civil rights cases of our time. Until next time, keep seeking truth and demanding justice for all. This powerful narrative reveals how racial bias operates regardless of status or achievement. Dr. Carter's experience demonstrates that education, professional standing, and material success provide no immunity from discrimination. The systems designed to protect citizens often work to protect themselves instead, creating multiple barriers to accountability when those with power abuse it. True change requires both individual courage and collective action. One person's refusal to accept injustice can catalyze structural reform, but lasting transformation demands institutional commitment. Justice isn't merely punishing wrongdoers, but reimagining systems that prevent harm in the first place. The story highlights how personal biases interact with institutional practices, creating environments where discrimination becomes normalized and even rewarded. Most importantly, we see that reconciliation requires truth, acknowledging harm, understanding root causes, and creating mechanisms that restore dignity rather than simply inflict punishment. Progress comes not from denying America's complicated relationship with race, but from confronting it honestly, recognizing both how far we've come and how far we still must go. The path forward requires transforming power structures rather than simply diversifying who holds power within broken systems. Justice reimagined means creating communities where everyone is truly protected and served equally. Have you ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling? How did Judge Carter's story resonate with your own experiences or observations of our justice system? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on whether our institutions are making meaningful progress or simply performing accountability without real change. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help others discover this important conversation. Subscribe to join our growing community dedicated to exposing injustice and celebrating those fighting for true equality under the law. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that racism doesn't disappear with education or achievement. It requires ongoing vigilance and reform. Thank you for bearing witness to Judge Carter's journey from victim to catalyst for change. Until next time, remember that justice isn't just a concept. It's something we must actively build together every single day.